Now we're ready to get into the meat of the day. We're going to have three speakers. We have three very knowledgeable speakers. So I think if I had to put a theme around this, it's around the idea of infrastructure, whether it be physical infrastructure or legal infrastructure, even social infrastructure. That's kind of the theme that I saw. Levi Esquerra, who is the director of the Center for American Indian Economic Development, that's part of the business school here at NAU.
Thanks so much for being here. As the dean said, my name is Levi Esquerra, and I'm thrilled with today. Not only is our second annual, and was we actually grown, but even more importantly, I'm grateful that my chairman's actually here to join us today and actually give a presentation a little bit later on about my tribe and what I really value. But in saying that, in preparation for this, I was going to build off of some of the things that we provided last year, and then I wanted to end with a personal story. Thanks so much. I'm already getting dry now. So. One of the things I want people to really understand is when it comes to, we always hear tribal sovereignty, tribal sovereignty. And I think a lot of times we need to get a better grasp of where that comes to be. In the United States Constitution, there's a Commerce Clause. And as you can read here, one of the things that it cites is to regulate commerce among the tribes. And this was the beginning of what we commonly refer to as tribal sovereignty. And that has taken on many different directions over the years. But I think it's really important to show that we're actually in the Constitution, maybe our specific tribe, but it refers to us as Indian tribe. And as you can see, as the government has recognized these federal government tribes, we've become so-called domestic dependent nations, and there's continued to be clarification of who tribes are, what we can do. And a lot of that is because of who we are as a people. We all have different cultures, values, and traditions. And I think one of the major things on this that I wanted to point out is that about 7 or 8 years ago, we did a workshop here, the Indian Self-Determination Act. And I'm really grateful that we have Lynn Ingalls in the room today. Lynn, can you stand up?
Thank you, Levi.
For those of you who don't know, Lynn was actually, he was there at DC when the Indian Self-Determination Act actually came to be, and we invited some of the original authors there. And Lynn was actually the public relations specialist, so he knows this thing in and out. And one of the reasons why I want to point this out is one of the questions that came up from the Indian Self-Determination Act with these original authors is, hey, did it do everything you wanted it to do? Did it accomplish everything? And they said what they envisioned, maybe only 20% is what the tribes have been able to do yet. And yet it's self-determination. It's up to us to prove what we want to do. But yet in their minds, we've only reached 20–25% of that. So we have so much more opportunities for us to really be a self-determined people. And I just want to touch on that and thank Lynn for being here. As you know, here in Arizona, there's 22 tribes, and I'll show a map a little bit later, but each tribe is unique and different. Each tribe has their own form of government. In fact, we know that the federal government has their own code of federal regulations just for tribes. But even there, when you're working with the tribe, they'll have different cultures and values. They have different ordinances, different laws of the land. And I think it's really important to understand that. Similar if you're going to Europe and you meet with different countries over there, similar case here with the tribes here. We have different things we value. One of the things that you might know is some tribes have chairmen, some tribes have governors, some tribes have presidents. So it's really key to understand that tribal government makeup and what tribes can be through their makeup. Finally, here's a quick map. There's 22 tribes here in Arizona. Probably many of you know that. 21 with landmass. Two of the 3 biggest landmass tribes in the United States are in Arizona. People might not realize that, but we're really close to 28%, a little under 28% of the land of Arizona is tribal lands. And as you can see, the state of Arizona is made up of about 73 million acres. Tribal lands are about 20 million acres. So we really have a lot going on here in the state of Arizona. Our impact is huge. One of the things I wanted to talk about is the counties, the makeups of the counties. Sorry about that, I thought I had this fixed last night. And as you can see, there's a couple of counties that more than 50% of that county is actually made up of tribal lands. Our supervisor from Coconino mentioned that, 46%. I mean, that's huge when it comes to even working with counties and the opportunities that are available there. One of the things that people may not realize is that the state collects a transaction privilege tax within the tribal lands. So statewide in fiscal year 2015, it was a little over $45 million. It's quite a bit, I think. You know, the biggest tribe collecting is Navajo Nation, a little over 23. And then the next two are going to be metro tribes, right? We have Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community and the Gila River Indian Community, a little over 9 and 5 million. Now I might get in trouble with this next one, but I need to share it. The next biggest collector, transaction privilege tax, I think might surprise you, is Yavapai Prescott. This just shows you what kind of commerce they have going on within their community. The other two tribes that provide over $1 million in transaction privilege tax to the state are a couple more. You see they're a little over $1 million apiece. This has a big impact on the state of what it contributes back to the state of Arizona, this transaction privilege tax being collected on tribal lands and given to the state. Here's a breakdown of what it's been, and as you can tell from the recession of 09, it was down a little bit, 010 I guess, and then after that there's been a steady incline. It's been a little over 45 million these last 3 fiscal years. This last is where we're currently at, up year to date up to February. And I think it's going to come in close to 45 million again being collected on tribal lands and going into the state. Another big impact that we know that the tribes have on the state of Arizona, oh, I should have did that earlier, is the tribal contributions. For the last 2 fiscal years, I just broke it down how much they've actually contributed to the state of Arizona. And these are specific programs. You have the problem with gambling, the Arizona Department of Gaming. That's a percentage, or it's capped at $8 million. And then you have an instructional improvement fund. That's supposed to go to smaller classrooms, teacher salaries, really to benefit it. And each of the school districts here in Arizona receive these funds. And a lot of it's based upon population, so it's not just where on tribal lands. This is throughout the state of Arizona. And it has a huge impact. You know, one of the things I think people don't realize, I realized it early on. I had a daughter taking a class, and it was an AP class at our high school. And the first semester, there was 2 classes, and the next semester they came back and it was only 1 class, and she talked about how she was fortunate to stay in the class because she made an A. In the classroom size, there wasn't enough seats. So 2 of the kids shared a bean bag, one shared at the teacher's desk, and I was questioning, well, why would the school eliminate a class and then they don't even have enough seats for all the students? So at the urging of one of my friends, Will Town, I was talking a little bit about that, and you know, he encouraged me, well, contact the superintendent. So I did. I said, hey, what's going on? Is this your protocol, you know, is to eliminate classes and then not even have enough seats? And he put it back to the principal. And I said, well, what about the instructional improvement fund? And he talked about how great that they are at accounting and everything else. And I said, well, I looked at it this last year, you know, the Tribes for the Arizona Benefits Fund has provided close to $1 million to your school, and this is what it's supposed to go to. And it's really interesting because at first he was like, hey, we have a great accounting, and people come to us, and then he turned around and I said, I'd like to see where those funds are being spent. And it really put that school board in position of, hey, we got to be accountable for these funds because they have a big impact within our own schools. You know, I know we're always questioning about our education, but the tribes are really actually contributing quite a bit to our education here in the local schools. Then we have our trauma centers, wildlife and conservation, and state tourism. I know Don Melvin's here today. They provide quite a bit to the state tourism office as well. So those are some of the things that I wanted to just to highlight real quick of what the tribes are committing and the economic impact they're having to the state of Arizona. Once again, here's a little bit more of the information on the total contributions. And if you're following the news, last year it went over $1 billion. I think it's at $1.1 billion since the new compact has been implemented. One of the other things that I want to just touch on briefly, and we talked about this a little bit last year, but I just want to highlight, Arizona is the 3rd largest tribal population. Because of that, there's 3 major federal governments that have a big say in what goes on here in the state of Arizona. One is HUD, and a lot of people, this is where the Indian Block Grant, that a lot of tribes do a lot of their bricks and mortar projects. And I want to urge you, this isn't just their housing, because they have their Native American Housing Self-Determination Act, the HOSDA. This is separate funds, it's competition. So it's actually grant dollars that flow in for providing bricks and mortars within tribal communities. Then we have the BIA and what role they play, and this is their budget and the impact that it actually has here in the state of Arizona. I'll get into that. Here's the IHS, what their roles and what they're supposed to do. Currently, there's 22 hospitals and clinics. They provide quite a bit of service from that regard. Here's their estimates from fiscal year 2015 for Indian House Service. And just the funds that are actually transmitted here to run these hospitals and the other services that they do with the health care system. This is probably the area that I want to spend a little bit more of my time on. Last year there was a question about the Buy Indian Act. So in July of 2015, the GOA actually did a counting of it. Because I often get asked, well, hey, great, there's these programs that provide a lot of monies and opportunities, but what about businesses? And there's the Buy Indian Act, which is a program that's in place that these in this case, Bureau of Indian Affairs and IHS, percentage of those contract dollars they receive have to go to Indian-owned businesses, whether it's tribal enterprise or individual Indian-owned. And as you can see, just the changes from, especially with the Bureau of Indian Affairs on your left, from fiscal year 2010 to 2014, although the dollar amounts are down quite a bit, you can see that the Buy Indian Act, the obligations of buying with these, purchasing with these Indian-owned companies, whether it's a tribal enterprise or Indian-owned, has actually increased double from 6% of their budget to 12%. I think the reason why I'm showing that I think that's a huge opportunity if you're looking at economic development and opportunities to contract out with the federal government. It's to actually stress the opportunity to, hey, you're obligated. These are programs in place, and if you spend any time reviewing this, they'll say that maybe this program hasn't been effective as it can be, but I think it's on us to make it effective and to work and challenge the Bureau of Indian Affairs and IHS to actually meet their obligations and provide us the opportunities to provide those services. One of the big things about this that I want to point out is the area that we actually reside in. We're in the western area. And as you can tell from 2010, the majority of the funds went to the central office, which rightfully so. But in the fiscal year 2014, you have the Western Regional and the Navajo Regional, that a little bit over $10 million, give or take, are eligible for the contract obligation for the Buy Indian Act. And I know your question will be is, well, what kind of services do they need, or what do we need to, what kind of businesses are available? They actually broke that down. In the case of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the biggest one is architect engineering, maintenance and construction. So when they're actually doing business, this is some of the programs that they're actually looking for. So you can roughly say about $3.7 million is available for the Buy Indian Act in this regard. But there's other things from custodial for housekeeping you can see from the slide. Unfortunately, I don't know what the other category is, so maybe next year I can do some research and I'll have the answer for you. But this is a tremendous opportunity that's there for Indian country. Indian House Service, once again, you can see California was taking a majority of the contract, the Buy Indian Act. And then by the year 2014, it's pretty much down, and usually it's just the Phoenix area. And this could be a little bit misleading because the Phoenix area encompasses more than the Arizona area. It encompasses other states as well. But still, once again, they actually have a little bit over $1 million for providing these services, or these business opportunities for tribal enterprises and tribal member-owned businesses. And a majority of theirs goes to professional administrative support. So I wanted to point this out to you, and the reason why is because I think there's a tremendous opportunity. This is an economic outlook, and I think this is an area that tribes can actually focus on for increasing their tribal enterprises and also their tribal member-owned businesses. And in saying that, one of the things I'm really passionate about, and I haven't told this story in a long time, and then I actually just shared it with my dean about a week ago, because 2 weeks ago I was actually visiting with my daughter who's in college, and she came out wearing a shirt that had a big old painter's stain on it, and I started laughing, and I said, you know, I remember the last time I wore that shirt. She's like, when? So I went to tell her this story. When I graduated from undergraduate, I went to go back to work for my tribe. And this was in the middle of the 90s. And at the time, we had 5 employees. We have our tribal chairman, our tribal vice chairman, our secretary treasurer, an accountant, and then myself as the tribal planner. And shortly after that, we hired someone to work in the agriculture department. And we had 1 building. And you know, I was very fortunate for this job. And one of the first things we did is we procured funding for to get computers to get automated. And we had some challenges, but we also had a tremendous opportunity. Being I don't want to say we're a young tribe because we've been around, and I know our chairman's going to touch on that, but we were actually reorganized in 72. And our tribal lands is what we tend to call the eastern shore of California. So we're on the Colorado River, Lake Havasu City. And when we got our land back and all that, there was an area that was simply known as the colony. And now I don't think it's even referred as the colony. And it was a lot of home site leases there, non-tribal. And the leases expired after 20 years, and they were paying about $360 to the Bureau of Reclamation. And one of the things that happens is to renew a lease, in our case it had to be approved by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and they need fair market value. So instead of paying $360, they're going to be charged $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for their property, depending on where it was. And so we were having some disagreements. Some of them were staying there, some of them weren't. A couple of years when I returned back to my tribe, I was fortunate enough to run for council, and was elected chairman. And one of the things that I remember meeting with our tribal attorney, and I says, I want to deal with this issue. It's huge because I think this impacts what all tribes face when it comes to land use planning and implementing your land use plan, whether it's for economic development or community development. And we're a little bit more challenged, I would say, than the tribes here in Arizona and others, because we're a Pump Cloud 280 state. And therefore, jurisdictions on criminal matters go to the state of Arizona or state of California, unless it's the Big Five, the Major Crimes Act. But I'm sure if I'm wrong, the chairman can correct me on that. So we developed a trespassing code and went through the state attorney general's office, and they, after some negotiation, they finally agreed to accept it. And then I remember they asked me, well, who do we want to challenge first or remove first? Because we had some people who were continuing to live there, not paying any money at all, or paying the former rate of $360. And me being a little naive and a little young, everyone thinks my picture on here looks a little bit young, but you'll see my picture here soon. I said, let's go after Needles Lodge and Gun Club, which is about a 3-acre peninsula, beautiful lot. And, you know, council, everyone gets wild up, all right, let's go do this. And so we had these papers drafted that was recognized by the state of Arizona, or state of California, I'm sorry, I keep saying that. I'm from Parker, that's my home still, so I still, sorry, Chairman. And then, in the midst of all this, the state attorney general's office changed their mind and wouldn't recognize our trespassing code. Our tribe, April's a big month. The last Saturday of April is what we call our annual meeting. And that's when Chemehuevis come back, and we actually, I call it practice a true form of democracy. Because that's the time when tribal council sits and the membership comes and they make motions on the floor and they second it and they vote, and that becomes the law of the land right then and there, along with our tribal elections. Well, a week before this big event, we found out because Neologic Gun Club showed back up and started using the 3.5 acre peninsula site again for their activities. Put us in a bind. You know, and I remember specifically sitting there with Vice Chairman at the time, Tito Smith, Secretary Treasurer Jackie Gordon, and one of our council members, David Chavez, saying, what are we going to do? How are we going to exercise our sovereignty? How are we going to work with the state of California on this issue that we thought we had resolved? And I'll never forget, our Vice Chairman at the time, I remember he hit the desk and he says, you know what, if they want to be there, they can be there. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He says, you know what, the only area in contention is this 3.5 acres. It's never the roadway going in. It was a dirt road. He says, if they want to be there, they're going to be there. So what he recommended, and we ended up doing the next night early in the morning, is we got out of backhoe and we trenched in the roadway going in. We trenched it in. And while we were doing that, they were waking up and they saw what was going on, and they called the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office, and they came rushing down, and Highway Patrol was there, which kind of surprised me too. And they asked if we were the ones who called, and we said, no, that's the one in there. They went in and they talked to this group. And then we decided we shouldn't just do it at the main entrance, we should do it at the road where it turns off as well. So I went in and I told the county sheriffs, hey, we're gonna trench behind your cars. They took off running, they left to park on the main road. And then they came and they approached us and said, you know what, they're really concerned about their health and safety reasons. And I said, you know what, I understand that. But I also know our tribe, we provide a pontoon boat accessed by the resort, that they can use that if there's any issues that come up that they need medical advice, because that's one of the things that we contribute here. So long story short, that week was a buildup. The state of California, once again, their Attorney General's office changed their mind and recognized our trespassing code as long as we would fill in the roadway and let them leave. And we did. But one of them actually put one of our conservation officer, our federal officer, under arrest. And that's me actually walking in, looking a little bit younger than what I do now, wearing that shirt that my daughter wears today. And the reason why I tell this story is, when we came back from that annual meeting, right then on the floor, the tribal member made the motion to turn in Needles Lodge and Gun Club into Chemehuevi Park. It's a tribal park now. The tribe has actually invested quite a bit into it. It's our exclusive park. And that's when I think we actually became stewards of our land. That's when we start to implement our land use plan of what that area, what we want it to be. And now the chairman, you know, it seems like it's many years ago for me, our current chairman, that's his goal, is inviting tribal members to come back, is to have an acre lot on the pristine area on the Lake Havasu Lake. And it was a long process until we got that in order, but I want to challenge you that I know many of you tribes, you have land use plans, you have your economic development plans, and the implementation is the hardest thing to do. But I really appreciate what the supervisor said. She said they knew there was an issue. The issue was just to do it. Same with us. It was just for us to do it, to address this issue. The same with every tribe here. It's just to address your land use plan, to put it into place. Maybe you need updating of feasibility studies or market studies, and you know what, CAIED can certainly help you out. Claudia Nelson here from U of A, they can assist you in that as well. We have resources to provide you, but I think it's just the implementation is our challenge, and that's what we need to concentrate on doing. And with that, I have no more to say. I think afterwards we might actually have a little bit more questions, but I'm going to turn some time over to Matt.